Yeah. Yeah, Josh, why don't you just jump right in with the.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen as we talk about this month's mission moment. Welcome, everyone. Happy October, busy time of year, but some exciting stuff to kind of maybe focus in on as we kick the meeting off. And this is something that we talked about during the SLC meeting last week, and that I've been touting with our families during the scoop. And so this moment is really about the integration between enrichment and academics and some of the programming that we have in effect that I think really makes that happen. And so this year, in thinking about electives and in thinking about experiences for kids, we launched a debate program with the Brooklyn Debate League. And it was this summer in the making. So it's still very much in pilot form, but we've hit the ground running with regard to what kids have experienced thus far. So we do have a class going on. It's co-led by our 12th grade history teacher in working with the Brooklyn Debate League. Josh, you may see some familiar faces here. So I think these folks have been in the mix throughout New York and with some of the networks in past years. But we have a volunteer coach in addition to this 12th grade teacher, Ms. Tartan. His name is Coach Conyers, and he's been tremendous for our kids, really intense, has been doing this work both as a student at Frederick Douglass many years ago, as well as a coach. And recently, he was in the news for essentially raising some money for the Brooklyn Debate League to keep it alive. His sort of mentor, who's with him on the right, has been involved in debates forever in New York City. I believe she might be at Stuyvesant now as a debate coach there, or he, I'm sorry. So they raised some money recently through a GoFundMe, which raised over $1 million for this debate league. And so a lot of press coming through that. It went viral. 2 weeks ago, he was on the Kelly Clarkson show. Some of our students were also on that show and featured there, in addition to a whole host of articles over the past month or so, telling the story. And so we're happy to have him. He's a talent, comes with a full heart. We may have a graduation speaker in the mix in the future, but in terms of what our kids are experiencing, like they are gaining some real deal skills in communication and in advocacy, and in the art and craft of speech and debate. And so recently our kids have taken part in 2 or 3 tournaments. There was a tournament at Berkeley Carroll here in Brooklyn, which is a private school, on Friday. And prior to that, we've been battling some of the bigger charter names in the world and doing pretty well. So it feels good. This is a growing program. This team, this board, you've seen some of our other programs grow and prosper. Our nationally ranked STEP team, for example, and I see lots of promise and potential with this debate program too. So right now, it's very small and only a couple months old, but hopefully the idea is that we in a few years think back to maybe this conversation, this mission moment, and say, wow, how far this thing has come. And so that's the mission moment tonight. Obviously, this is going to be really important and meaningful skill work for our kids, both at our school and certainly beyond our school post-graduation. So with that, back to you, Jim, unless folks want to ask a few questions about what this program is about, how they might chip in and help out, et cetera.
Kudos. This is really cool. Congratulations.
Thanks, Earl. And so there are a couple of ways in which you can chip in, one being a volunteer judge. And so if you're interested in perhaps taking part as a judge in an upcoming tournament, please let me know. I may nudge you anyway in future correspondence, but that is one way very directly that you can be involved in school, see kids learn, be challenged, flourish, etc. So that is there for you.
I'm definitely interested, Josh. My schedule is crazy now that I'm traveling. But as long as I get a week and a half notice, I'll make whatever sacrifices to be there. Thank you.
Terrific. And some of them are virtual, Earl, so maybe.
I would appreciate that. I would appreciate that.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Josh. Now let's do the head of school report.
Cool. So let me open that up for you all right now. You have that in your inboxes if you want to open it up yourself. There are about 4 points I want to discuss tonight that I think represent updates or perhaps some additional context. So let me do that now. Okay, so I think as I mentioned, and as I've mentioned now in prior meetings since the school year began, obviously a busy time for us as a school, but I think some good things to show for it. And so I think in that intro, I offer some of the ways in which we are are working away so that our kids experience a really successful, tremendous year of school in 22-23. In terms of headlines, a couple I do want to note beyond what's listed here, or maybe going beyond what's listed here. And most of what we talk about over the course of the meeting tonight will be represented here as well as in conversation. So I'll just pick off a few areas that I think are worth naming now that we may not get to or may not return to later in the meeting. So just first with family engagement right now, a couple of big events at the school. We have back to school night in late September. We have not met since that event. And then we had our first family ambassadors meeting, which is a bit of a new thing in collaboration among our middle school and high school, where we have specific family engagement counselors at each site working together in collaboration, and then a panel, a cohort, a group of family members who are teaming up to do things for school that help enrich school, bring more of their kids' educational lives. And so really successful first meeting with about 30 families. And it's nice to see the collaboration across sites happening as we think about ways in which we integrate and kind of marry the middle school experience and high school experience so that they're seen as one, which is our intention and our design. All right, Lenny's in. We do now officially have quorum, which is terrific. Hey, Lenny, thanks for making time. I know you're coming out of a community board meeting, so good to have you here tonight. How are you? Give him a second to connect. So as we're doing that, I'll just also say that other updates here with regard to state exams, still no update with regard to how we did in relation to the state and district. So we still don't have those comparable numbers. There's some general headlines that you may have seen in the news about how schools in the state and perhaps nationwide have done. NAEP results came out, or there was a report a couple of days ago with like these national exams. And I think the headlines are similar to what we're seeing in the city and across the state, which is that math scores are really down in comparison to prior years. ELA scores slightly, but that's what we got right now. So it's still sort of this question mark as to why results by district and by state haven't come out. So we're awaiting them. Other miscellaneous updates here with fall athletics. Just I want to note that we do have 4 new offerings at our middle school. And so there's a whole host of things going on after school in our playground and in our gymnasium. So I'm just proud of this. We've got more kids raising hands saying, I want to take part in sports after school. We have more coaches who are coming from our faculty to take part in sports and engaging with kids both in the classroom and beyond. So I think this all means good things for like the general whole experience of our kids in school. So I want to name that because it is a success. And then similarly with our club offerings, one new club offering we have. I've told you a bit about our high school offerings in the past, but we are returning some of our middle school club offerings to our school, in addition to our collaboration with St. Nick's Alliance, which offers another host of after-school activities. And so we've got 5 new clubs, all that are faculty run at our school, happening 2 or 3 days a week, depending on the club at the middle school. And again, just more experiences for kids that are meant to expand their learning. So a few things I'll tout there that I'm proud of. Finally, we, as you know, survey families, students, and staff twice a year with a software program called Panorama, which is fairly well known. The DOE uses it too. So it's well vetted, but we have used that for the past 2 years to get data on just how families, students, and staff are feeling, what their perceptions are of school. And so we just closed that survey and now have results that we're analyzing that I'll bring to the full board next month. But that's something that we experienced over the past 4 weeks. So I'll bring that to you next meeting. In addition to these headlines, I'll also provide a bit of an update on hiring and staffing and where things stand now in comparison to where we were last month. So we've hired up in 3 key positions over the past month with a history and learning specialist, an associate AD at the high school, and a manager of operations at the high school. With regard to current vacancies right now, we have an E&L teacher in the as a vacancy, and we actually have an offer outstanding for a candidate who we feel good about there. That person would also be doing some reading interventions at the school. So we do have a need for a reading interventionist, but have a few people in the pipeline in addition to this potential hire. And then we have at least one vacancy with a learning specialist in the humanities at the high school, perhaps 1.5. And so we have 3 candidates in the pipeline there. So some progress made. Our goal is to hire up for each of these positions by the end of this month. There's some interviews happening this week. So I foresee us making a few hires, perhaps not fully hiring up for all these vacancies, but making additional progress, with progress beyond that happening in the week after. So I'm feeling good about the momentum. Some of the things we're doing are similar to what we've done the past couple of months. We've got a referral bonus in the mix. We've got a daily update coming from me and our hiring team to share and disseminate information about new candidates and new potential hires. And then we've got some sponsored postings in LinkedIn and Indeed. And I think pipeline wise, I don't think that's as much an issue right now. We've got ample people sort of in the mix, and now it's just about making good decisions. So that's where things stand hiring wise. Are there any questions about vacancies and staffing at this point? We are staffing each of these positions that are open internally, and that feels like it's best for kids. Any questions there? Great. So I'm next going to move to STAR fall assessment results, and I'm going to give you a sort of piece of the report out here, and then move into more of the report out during the SLC share out. And so I think headlines are this: as y'all know, we use STAR to assess growth over time. This is the first time this year that we've assessed, so we really don't have a growth metric. We'll have that in the winter with the second testing, but we are also able to get some measure of where kids are now in comparison to a national norm, and in comparison to sort of the state and that average, and even get some projections here. So I want to share the projections now, which I think is the sort of good news with regard to what we're seeing in this data. We're going to move into some of the more somber stuff and serious stuff when we move into the SLC discussion today. But in terms of forecasted proficiency as measured by STAR as of the fall, we assessed about 90% of our kids across the board. There's always a bit of give and take with regard to kids perhaps having attendance issues, or perhaps there being some movement at the beginning of the year with kids being enrolled in our school or not. And so anyway, we feel good about the participation rate with regard to the number of kids that have completed the exam. And so the one kind of measure I'll mention here, there is a way to assess forecasted proficiency in reading and in math, where this gives you a sense of, according to STAR, how kids would do in projecting out to the spring on the spring exam in both ELA and math at our middle school. So I'm sharing these results with you now. I'm also sharing here in the table the results from last year, so you're able to get a sense of what did fall STAR results provide as of last year versus what are they providing or showing as of this year. So in blue, you've got, for reading anyway, by grade, the percentage of students in each grade who are projected to score proficiently based on how they did in this exam in the fall. It's a short exam, it's an imperfect measure, but it gives us something with regard to projections and forecasting. And so you'll note the blue bars overall are higher than where we were last year. These results are still not where we want them to be with regard to where we'd like for kids to be at the end of the year, but they're promising, and that we're starting seemingly based on this assessment at a higher point on average in each grade than we were last year. I'll also say that, as you recall, last month in sharing out STAR results last year and some of our other interim assessment results, and then their ability to predict or their correlation with actual exam results, STAR was a pretty consistent under predictor, meaning that how kids scored in STAR was relatively lower than how they actually scored on the real exam in the spring. So these percentages, if that trend holds, assuming that you see here in blue, are perhaps lower than what we would see in the spring, which would be the story I'd want to sort of be able to tell at the end of the year. So that's reading. The same general trend exists in mathematics, where you'll note bar-wise, as I said, nationally, in thinking about how kids did last year in math versus prior years. And it's been tough. It's been a really tough go. And And so in looking at where things are from a relative standpoint this year to last year in math, we seem to be starting at a slightly higher level than we started at last year. So obviously room to grow. We're going to say more about kind of like STAR and math versus reading a bit later on, but I wanted to give you at least one data point on what we're taking from this first round of assessments with STAR this fall. Are there any clarifying questions here? Jeanette, do you want to name anything that you think is also relevant based on our conversation last week, just on forecasted proficiency?
No, I think you covered it. I think we sort of struggled with this data at this point.
Yeah.
But we need to figure out how to get predictive data in a better, in a way that's more usable. So I think it's a work in progress.
Yep. So again, we're kind of parsing this out and looking only at forecasted proficiency here. We'll look at some other values momentarily during the SLC share out. Also within the school report, in looking at miscellaneous updates, I'll move into just health and safety update there. Things have been really good this year in general, like feel so much better to be in school and just back to normal-ish, I think is the observation that we've experienced, and I think other schools have experienced too. And at the same time, things are coming up here and there. And so we did have this past month, we had 9 confirmed cases among our faculty, 8 were at the high school. So we had a 3 or 4 day stretch at the high school where like people were stretched and we had a number of people out and we had to cover. And so I guess I say that for a few reasons. One is that folks are healthy back in school. So from a current standpoint versus where we were 2 years ago, we're in a much sort of better, safer, more confident place with regard to like what COVID means for school and for families and faculty. But at the same time, if folks are out for a few days, which is happening because this thing is still pretty contagious, it does have an impact on our daily operation of things. So that's just a realness to the work right now. So you may be experiencing some of the same stuff at your workplace, but that's been where we are. I think right now there's 1 positive case at the middle school as of 2 days ago. There are 0 at the high school. So this thing seems to sort of waver depending on circumstances. Are there any insights or questions here about health and safety, the unpredictable land of COVID, et cetera? All right. And I think the other portions of updates that are in this report will be also highlighted in share outs by subcommittees. So I'm going to pause there and kick things back to Jim Ellsworth.
Okay, let's go to the data dashboard.
All right, so same deal here. Let me open up my screen one more time. And so there are about 5 tables I want to highlight here, which represent different aspects or buckets of school that we've looked at in the past with each month with varying degrees of frequency. And so I'll start with student enrollment. As we do, in general, we're in a very, very healthy place, which I think is both great, feel solid about it and proud of my team and the work they've done. As well as I think we're a bit of an outlier here. And then I think a lot of schools are suffering through some enrollment struggles and things, particularly this year coming out of COVID and perhaps over the past 2 years. So generally speaking, we're at just under 100% full utilization across the school in comparison to our target enrollment. So we've got 550 kids at the school as of now. I should say just beyond 100%, not under 100%. And so especially healthy is our 6th grade. I want to say Chris pulled some data for the team a couple of days ago. I believe we might be the biggest 6th grade cohort in CSD 13, which is a big deal because there are some big schools that have been around a long time that have a history that are also in that mix. So I feel really strongly about this 6th grade and where we are right now. Our 8th grade, we've been intentional about. We've got fewer sections of classes in the 8th grade, as you all know. We've talked about this before. And so generally speaking, we are in a good place with enrollment. And so I feel, again, proud of team and the work they've done with the outreach over the course of last spring, moving in the summer, and that things have unfolded in such a way that was very much in line with our predictions as of the spring, which is important. So let me pause there and see if folks have questions about enrollment at this point in time before moving into some of the other updates.
You've got wait lists in 10, 11, 12, especially with 10 and 11.
Mhm.
Why wouldn't we move those folks in?
It's just that this is a snapshot in time. So it might be in process. It probably is. With the
okay.
12th grade, we're maxed out with regard to number of kids we have
Yeah.
in sections and in the classes we have. And I think, in terms of like serving kids especially well, 12th grade is really late in coming into our school. And so we're not going to have the same impact. And so there's a bit of that there with regard to that wait list being bigger. We're going to have more impact and be serving kids and families more effectively in the earlier high school grades.
Good.
So another new update, and Madonna, greetings. How are you tonight? Good to have you here. Hope all is well.
Hi, how are you?
Doing all right. And so it's been a full day. I'm sure it's been a full day for you too, but good to be with the team tonight and talking about school and where things are in October.
Awesome.
So demographically, we do have some new data about like where our student population lies in terms of subgroups in comparison to our district of location in prior years. We don't have that data this year, and in comparison to the state. So up here in the second column, you'll see sort of where we are with the number or percentage of kids in our school this year who have classified disabilities, have IEPs. We're at 23%, so just short of a quarter of our kids. And you'll see how that compares to prior years, and then how that compares to our district level location and at the state level as of 2020 and 2018. So some of this data is a little old. We apply it when we get it. So that's where we are there. And then you'll see also the same sorts of comparisons for students classified as economically disadvantaged and students classified as learning English as a first language or as a second language. And so in general, we are overrepresented with the percentage of students who have IEPs and students classified as economically disadvantaged in comparison to our district of location, which spans a pretty large geography. In general, we're proud to be serving the kids we are, and feel as if we're impacting and carrying out our mission most by serving all and doing the service we can, particularly for those students who have been served least well in our education system. So I think this data sort of reflects some of that. Are there questions about the specific data and our demographic this year in comparison to last year's, in comparison to state and districts? Other things worth flagging, perhaps? Cool, I'll move us forward. And so I'm only moving to some of the tables that are highlighted in green because that's where the updates are. We'll talk about finance with Alex's virtual share out tonight. Student attendance wise, at the middle school, we're at 90%. At the high school, we're at 86%. Goal, the historical goal has been 92%. I do think we still have perhaps more students out because of what we've experienced over the past couple of years with routine, habit, etc. So we're kind of working against that. Luckily, we've got a lot of resources with regard to our social work team, operations team, PBIS teams to sort of work through and support kids at varying levels depending on their circumstances and being in school each and every day. So there's been, ignore this last column because these averages didn't exist last month, which is why they are what they are. But there's been some good movement at both sites over the past few weeks in looking at this data in a more nuanced way. So I feel like we're trending in the right direction in having more students in each and every day moving forward. Are there questions about attendance right now?
Do you guys track whether is this one or two persistent people, or is this
Yeah.
so persistent, or is it across the
Good-
board?
Good question. It depends. We do track that data. And I wasn't ready to quite share that out, but that's usually represented here in this table where we look at the percentage of students who have less than 80% attendance, between 80 and 89% attendance, and over 90% attendance. So at the high school, for example, we do have a handful of kids that have not been at school, and perhaps they're going through some stuff. Perhaps they're just disenchanted with school right now. And so our social work team is in touch with their families and those students to figure out ways to get them back in our school. Or in the event that like we're not the premier school for kids, figuring out a way in which we identify that school for those kids so that they're inspired to be in school. So in a very small number of cases, we've had conversations about that with families as possibilities. So that's attendance right now. Any other questions? I'll move us forward then. So in looking at suspension rates right now, I don't have rates, I have numbers. And so we've had 12 unique suspensions at the school over the past a month and a half. We've got 550 kids. So about 2% of our population has experienced this, suspension based on our policies at the school. If you look at kind of the breakdown of things, there were a couple of altercations outside of the school that happened after school. So that for us, that certainly impacts what goes on in the building too. And so we do take that seriously. And typically there's a suspension for a couple of days. There's some communication with families, a mediation that happens, a reentry, and then some follow-up as kids kind of reimmersed to school. And that's been our process. And as a result, we feel like we've minimized such occurrences happening again. So generally, that's where we are with suspensions at this point in time in the year. Are there any questions here? I will move us forward. And I think there are two more tables I want to provide. So just first with family participation, there are a couple of big events that we do track with regard to participation. In general, I feel really positive about participation among families thus far this year, particularly with that ambassadors group I mentioned earlier. Some of the data doesn't sort of like show that in the way we wanted in comparison to goals. So as you see some sort of pink here with regard to back to school night, we had just under half our families take part in that. That was about 3 weeks after family orientation also going on. And so I feel as if maybe family orientation crowded out some of the attendance with back to school night. And so some of the numbers are lower than what we had anticipated or wanted. Still strong showings. I feel good about this. And I do feel as if beyond this data, engagement is stronger this year than what it's been in the past. And so that's where things stand with regard to like how we're tracking this and how we're then responding. So next batch of big events for us is fall conferences. That's just before the Thanksgiving holiday. We will do an evening set of conferences, and then we will do an a remote day of conferences as well, to cater to all parties and needs so that we're having fruitful conversations with families on kids and students in progress. Are there any clarifying questions or observations here with family participation?
Just a random question, Josh. Why is our target so much lower for fall conferences than spring conferences?
Based on prior years, that's all. Actually, you know what? You good eye. That might be a typo, Marion. That might be 70%. Let me look at that. But we've never had, maybe in our first and second year, we got up to close to 90% with regard to one class of kids and everyone being there. But we haven't reached that level before. So I believe that's a leftover, that's an error.
Okay.
Good eye. Student participation in extracurriculars, I've already noted this in the headlines, but in terms of like raw numbers, we've got just under 60% of our kids taking part in after school activities at the school. That's a big number. So what that really means is that kids are experiencing school from roughly 7:30 to 8 to 3:30, and then if something in the afternoon from 3:30 to say 4:30 or 5, and then go home. So it's a full day of experiences. And so this feels good. This is probably as strong as it's ever been as a school. And then with SPED compliance, 3 times a year, we get data on the degree to which we're in a good place with compliance. I want to explain some of the values here. So there are a couple of things we look at. First, how many of our IEPs are up to date? So just 3 general measures. They don't measure everything, but they give us some sense of like, hey, how are things going? Are IEPs being cared for, and are they being updated at appropriate times? Are services being fully met, partially met, perhaps based on our programming, or not met at all? That's not good. That's what we generally look at. And what you'll see here is from an up-to-date IEP standpoint, we're in good form at both sites. With regard to IEPs being fully met, this is more of a city-wide thing, and that right now we've got a number of kids at our school, about 30 kids at our middle school that should be receiving speech or occupational therapy. Typically, there's a service that provides that through the DOE, and there have been shortages in that area. So we haven't been able to get some of those services up and running as soon as we would like and should happen. This again is common across other schools. And so what we're doing about it is a couple of things. There are vouchers you can provide to families so they can go out and get this service on their own. We're offering that, although I don't think that's the best way of doing things. It puts the onus on families to find a provider where there's already a shortage. So I'm not sure that really solves the problem. Second is to hire someone. And so we are looking to perhaps bring someone on if the CSE isn't able to provide us with an available provider of occupational therapy and speech specifically. So that's why these numbers are in red here. Of those students that aren't receiving those 2 services I've mentioned, they're receiving partial services if they have ICT or 12-to-1 or some other mandated service on their IEP. So not concerned here, but I am concerned and that like this service should be provided and it hasn't been. So we're kind of doing things that we haven't done before to make it happen. That generally is where compliance is at this point in time. Are there questions about this? I expect this to be fixed by the beginning of this coming month.
Is the fact that we're currently not where we want to be potentially going to be a problem with renewal?
I think a lot of this is sort of about, okay, so this is something the school is struggling with. Why? And so I think the answers here is this is something that goes beyond our school and something related to the CSE and related services. And then what's the school doing about it? So I think as long as we have a sort of like case and a sort of like plan in place for how we're addressing this shortcoming, I think it actually bodes well because it shows that we're being strategic, being thoughtful, being proactive around some of the things that may be somewhat outside of our control or not something we're accustomed to because the service has not been something that has been hard to provide in the past.
Okay, thank you.
So that's where we are. I think that's the last update with our dashboard for tonight. So I'm going to kick it back to Jim
let's
here.
keep
Unless-
going with strategic plan.
Cool. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to open back up our school leader report. And we're going to talk a bit about our planning and preparation for the renewal visit, which is happening on the 15th and 16th of this coming month, November. Give me a moment. All right, there we go. So I think the idea here is I want to talk through what preparation has looked like thus far, what we're doing moving forward, and then I think an eye from this board on where we might sharpen this plan, or in thinking about there will be a focus group among board members during this renewal visit. You've experienced this in the past. And so if there are ways in which you think we ought to prepare differently for that session, which is an hour-long Q&A with our SED rep, Paula Orlando, and perhaps one of the consultants who joins her on the trip, it'd be helpful to kind of hear that as we sort of sharpen this. And Jim was on a call with myself and Michelle with Paula on Friday of last week. So Jim, feel free to chime in at any point in time if you got ideas based on what you heard from Paula in our conversation. So as I said, we're experiencing our renewal visit on the 15th and 16th of November. That's a Tuesday, Wednesday. The Tuesday will be a fullish day. We'll start about 10:30 because of just travel among our visitors, but it will end at 4:35. And then we'll go a half day on the 16th. So it's going to be a fast experience. In preparation thus far, senior school leaders, myself, our co-principals, as well as Michelle Roy-Gaines, our director of special projects, who's been instrumental in sort of like helping me through the facilitation of a lot of this stuff and been key in communication with our liaison. We've done some rehearsals and done some like mock visits and being in classes using the rubric that SED typically uses and thinking about what they're seeing in classes, and have done some pre-observation conversation. What do we expect to see in this class? What's this teacher about? What are the students in this class about? What are they learning about? And then going in, observing classes for a good 15, 20 minutes, then coming out and saying, all right, did you see what you expected? What feedback would you give this teacher? That kind of thing. That's been kind of like the way in which we've rehearsed this over the past. I think we've done 3 sessions of this and we'll continue with it this week. So that's felt good. And so we've done that, and we've done a mock school leader focus group with our outside consultant, Simeon Stoltzberg. He played the moderator, provided some feedback, and then we did the same thing with our support services team. Simeon playing moderator, and questions being asked about just our programming, our special populations, how we serve them, that kind of thing. And so overall, been really meaningful in getting feedback from him, experiencing it in a fairly rigorous fashion, and getting some reps in. So that's been the experience thus far. We'll continue with that over the course of the coming couple of weeks. So more observations. We're going to do another round of the support services focus group rehearsal with that external consultant. And then in thinking about the board focus group, and at this level, a couple of thoughts here that I want to put forward to you as proposals, and you can tell me. We should talk more broadly about whether this makes sense as a best path forward. So I'm working backward now. So if the focus group is on the afternoon of the 15th, which based on a very tentative draft is the proposal. By the way, I'll send out an invite as soon as I get that date down so that we've got ample participation in play. Working backward from the 15th, my sense would be that I based on my experience with the mock focus group, doing so at the board level, I think would also be helpful. I thought about people's time and thought about maybe doubling this up with one of the committee meetings going on in preparation for our next meeting, which is coincidentally also on the 15th. So the 15th will be a busy day for everyone. Us having a board meeting in the evening too, but I think there could be some benefit to that, I think. My sense would be to have one focus group with the board either during the ECPC call on Tuesday, the DFC call on Wednesday, or the SLC call on that Thursday. And so I'll talk through the entire sort of plan or proposal, and then you can talk back to it. So beyond that focus group, I could see, or I've actually sent the invite out. You guys have all now kind of hopefully responded to that poll about whether you can take part in a board visit on the 3rd or 4th at our middle school or high school, as we do typically each fall.
All right, Josh, because I must have missed it. I don't think
Okay. It was a part of the initial board meeting correspondence I sent for this meeting tonight, and it was maybe the 2nd or 3rd paragraph, but I can resend it certainly.
I think too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So rehearsal before that board visit. I think that reflects well if as members of the board you're able to sort of say, yeah, we were at the school this month, and here's some things that we saw. Here's some things that resonate with us. Here's some things the school's doing well. Here's some areas that are kind of growth areas that we got to see firsthand that we've discussed with Josh and his team on a monthly basis. That kind of thing, I think, really reflecting what this board is, which is a really kind of committed, vested board in our school. I would propose that. And then what I did yesterday is I sent out just some draft talking points to you all in the form of like, here are the big picture sort of like headlines of us as a school. And then here's some common questions that typically come up. And then I updated some of the questions and responses from what you took part in 2 years ago with the midterm visit, so that it's more representative of kind of where we are now as a school. And at the same time, there aren't a huge number of differences between some of the responses we put together 2 years ago and then where we are now. So we can look at that tonight if you'd like to, and maybe talk through some of the Q&A if that's helpful. But maybe the first question I put forward is from a series of steps leading up to the focus group. Is this just right? Too much? Too little? Would love to hear people's thoughts.
I mean, that seems to make sense to me, Josh. I think I would be a little wary of that one day where you said we're going to be super overscheduled. Like, I don't know. I think you said it was the 15th. I think, I would look into whether any of this can get moved around. I mean, I understand some parts can't, but yeah, I'm not sure what else I would do to get ready here.
Yeah, just to be clear, that good point, Mario. And so I think from a school leadership end, it's going to be a full day for us and for me, and that we'll have kind of like a day of renewal visit, and then we'll have a board meeting at night. I think I'm okay to roll with that. If you guys are, for you all at the board level, you would very likely have a remote Zoom focus group session for 1 hour in the afternoon, the 15th, and we convene as a board as we typically do remotely on the evening of the 15th.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Does that seem a
And
little
Josh,
more?
I think
Go ahead, Jim.
Paula seemed to indicate that we might have some flexibility in terms of scheduling. We can probably, if we don't want to do it in the afternoon, she didn't want to do it in the, late, because she's got a long trip back to the middle of Massachusetts somewhere, I think. So I think maybe what we could do is send something around now to see where our team's availability is on the 15th. It might be noon, it might be 2.
Yeah.
So let's do that. And then, because sadly, I'm in the middle of this kindergarten interview nonsense, and I've got 2 of those that day. So maybe we take the initiative and come back to Paula with times that work for us, and that would probably make things easier.
Geez, Jim, I had thought I was going to have a rigorous day, but maybe you'll top
my
what
God.
I have. You've got 2 kindergarten interviews and a board.
Do
focus
not
group in the chair.
get me going. Do not get me going. It's the worst. And my wife wants to apply at 10 schools, so it's insane. So anyway, but let's us take the initiative on proposing a time to Paula to do the board work.
I'll have, so here's the deal here. So as Paula said, she'd like something that kind of like cemented out by perhaps the first week of next week. So we're looking to have something set up by then. I can have Michelle send out some sort of survey to this team to get a couple of times and dates that would work best, whether it be the 15th at various times or the 16th. I will say, in thinking about the run of show over the course of the day, I think a priority for us is having school visits happen at a time where we're at our best, which is typically like late morning, early afternoon. We could do the afternoon as well. We're not, hiding anything, but that's where we're going to be at our best, and we want to put forward a good show. And then staff are in session, leadership's in session, typically till about 4:30 or 5. So my sense would be, in knowing your schedules and when we do committee meetings, that the afternoons tend to be sort of better for you than like prime time day, morning, early afternoon. But I can send something out with a few times that seem to work, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Cool. Are there any other insights? So what I'm kind of hearing from this team is that this sort of like series of events leading up to the big show makes sense to team. And so I should go forward in planning this forward with perhaps a Jim and maybe one other from this team, as well as my team, in coordinating.
Yeah. And then I don't know, do you want to talk about the talking points now? It sounds like people maybe haven't had time to look at them.
Yeah, so whatever people want to do, we so if this is the run of show, if this is what we're going to do, we can, I'm going to expand this out a little bit. There are a few other things I want to add in. I wanted to give you like kind of a 1.0 version of this. And then I thought, okay, so well, I'm going to get some feedback from this team. If we go through the mock one time and you're able to kind of look at the questions as we practice that, you may have some insights or some ideas or questions on, hey, I think there's a better way of kind of posing out a response here that's stronger, that reflects well from a governance level. We might identify those during the mock and can then make further updates to the Q&A as it stands now. So in that case, we don't have to go through it now. In fact, I can give people some time, and then we'll plan on scheduling the focus group rehearsal for the 8th, 9th, or 11th or 10th to give it a practice run.
I'd say, just to throw one thing in as you're thinking about the second version of this thing, one thing that jumps out is the whole expansion story. It would be nice to have something in here discussing the current environment for the kids K through 5 in our sort of neighborhood. What their options are right now, why we serve them better. Right now it talks about, of course, we would inherit a better 6th grade if we had control of the situation prior to that. But why we would, absent that issue, be a better option to these kids, given what they're looking at today. If you could get into some of that, I think that would be helpful.
Just taking a couple of notes here. Any other thoughts coming from other members of the board? And then the second thought here was, okay, so, and maybe the last question is, among this team here tonight, is there a preferred date? I guess maybe I can we'll send out a doodle poll for when the focus group should take place too. We got 2 weeks before that happens. So we'll send something out this week for that, in addition to perhaps some ideal times for the actual focus group on the 15th or 16th. Okay. All right, so I think that's strategic. That's where we are tonight.
Oh, sorry.
No,
AFC.
Yeah. So what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to share. Alex is unable to take part, but she did send me some footage. So we got a quick debrief with her, and then Mario and Jeanette, feel free to please chime in as other things perhaps come up that she doesn't address from that call 2 Fridays ago. Let me see here. All right, now I think what I want to do.
Good evening, Unity Trustees.
Oh.
This is Chris Dozier. I'll be providing an update.
Sorry, wrong tape. Could you guys hear that, by the way? You could hear that? Oh,
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, that was Chris. We've done the enrollment. He wanted to share an enrollment, but he's got to be here. I did that instead. So we're going to move into finance. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear Alex.
Good evening. This is the presentation of the August financial. It will be brief as there are not many changes since the reporting of the July financial last month. We are reporting the current enrollment based on the invoice for the month of August, which is 520. When we report out for September and months forward, we will be reporting that higher enrollment number that we have been discussed. But for the purposes of this financial, it's just based on what we have already invoiced for the month of August. As you can see, our metrics are all well within state ed's recommendations. There is a note here on the first page with the days cash on hand. Based on some clarifications that were provided from state ed, We have updated that metric to indicate that 60 days cash on hand is what they are looking for. And as you will see, at the end of the reporting month, we have 107 days cash on hand. We will continue to monitor that. If we believe we are going to dip below that 60 days, then we will make adjustments as needed to get that days cash on hand back to the acceptable metric. As of right now, the only real changes that we see is a slight variance based on our SPED enrollment and the classifications of those students. So that's not very significant, a little bit more than $30,000. We don't have any other projected variances at this point. We will report that out next month when we evaluate the change in student enrollment. We do know that on the expense side, we expect to see a variance in transportation based on the increased enrollment, and we had previously discussed that last meeting. Our year-to-date net income is about $308,000 based on activities through August compared to the budgeted year-to-date of $68,000. That gap will change as we go further throughout the year. And again, with cash flow, if you look out the next several months, we see that our cash balances are sufficient both to meet our operational needs and also to meet the state ed metric of 60 days.
Jeanette or Marion, would you add anything to what Alex has conveyed coming from that call?
I don't think so.
We also had, I guess, just our report out with Michelle. Is that right? That was that call, right? With Michelle Kane.
That's right.
Yeah, we did, we
The
went
audit was
audit. Yeah, all right. Don't we, Josh, do we need to approve the audit this month?
I don't believe so. I think that can hold off till next month. I don't believe so. And I think just generally, Jeanette or Marion, like what were the headlines on audit? I mean, it seemed to be fairly positive in my mind with regard to the feedback we got.
Yeah, the feedback was good. The changes were just due to some changes in auditing standards that move stuff around. So there were a number of changes to the presentation of the document. There was also a change in the type of audit that the school is subject to because of the amount of federal funding that we got in the 2021 to 2022 year. And because it was over whatever threshold amount, you were subject to federal single audit, and that just required more complicated procedures. But they were saying that for an institution that's going through that set of procedures for the first time, you guys did really well.
Great, I think so. That's the report out on the AFC call from 2 Fridays ago. Jim, do you want to say a few words about where we are with DFC, or do you want to hold that off till the approval item? Oh, you're muted.
Most of what we talked about is probably best done in executive session.
Okay.
So let's push it off until then. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. No report outs from our ECPC meeting. I think we talked a bit about the hearing that took place tonight, and then some other initiatives kind of in play around enrichment. So nothing to bring to the full board. And then with regard to SLC, I think there are 2 areas we're going to report out on. I'm going to say a bit more about sort of STAR results tonight. I want to get some feedback on team with some actions that we feel could be powerful in kind of moving the school forward. And then I want to say a bit about advanced placement and where things stand there. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. And Jeanette and Madonna, as I share out, feel free to chime in at any point in time based on our call and what we discussed. So as I said, during the school leader report share out, we administered STAR fall assessments this past month. We've got results. We don't have growth results, but we have some proficiency data, which I think is useful in thinking about where we are now in the year 2022 versus where we want to be, and then how we get there, both in the short term and long term. So I want to share out some of the other findings from that analysis. And I'm going to look first at, there's going to be some data here. So I first want to look at just, this is completion, not as important. As I said before, we had high participation across both sites, which is now the norm. So it's not something we're kind of building to now that this assessment is a part of our programming. I do want to spend some time looking at two data points specifically, grade and level equivalency and instructional reading levels, which I'll put it out there. These results are hard and I think reflect the kind of work that we have to do such that our kids are experiencing our mission of the school as being empowered to lead fulfilling lives. And so some of this data is coming up short of that. And so what you see here is our reading results and math results, reading on the left, math on the right, and then the bars represent by grade, the grade and level equivalency represented based on this assessment on average for each grade. And so what you'll note here, I'm going to just flag a couple of things. So in sixth grade, based on our kids coming to us this year, the average student, based on their reading assessment, is at about the sort of mid fourth year of school, 4.6. So they're like halfway, just beyond halfway through their fourth grade year in terms of that skill demonstrated on these exams. In math, it's something quite similar, 4.6. That might be 4.8. And then you'll see the way things sort of trend on from there. So there's some slight gains made, but not the kind of gains that we want to have being experienced as kids go from sixth grade to eighth grade. Ideally, what we're experiencing or what our kids are experiencing is some accelerated growth where by eighth grade, their grade level equivalency is eighth grade. And then they move on to our ninth grade and continue with that. This bump right here, I think represents the fact that some of our kids are not continuing on to our high school from our eighth grade. Some kids are getting other options that they feel are best. Maybe some of them are like really well suited for kids, given their interests, et cetera. And so this past year, I think I noted this in the last meeting, we did have less than 50% of our kids continue on from our eighth grade to ninth grade. That's not acceptable, not in thinking about our program and design. And so we want more of our kids. In my sense, we should be getting 80% of our kids to our high school from our eighth grade. That did not happen this year. It has happened in past years, particularly early on, but we've struggled there for a few reasons that I think require maybe a separate deep dive during another meeting, but there's some work to do that I'll name tonight in looking at that. So what that means, and I haven't done this analysis, is that as kids move on from eighth grade to ninth grade, and only some of our kids continue on to our ninth grade, we have now room for kids from other schools, other middle schools coming into our ninth grade. And what we've seen in the past when this analysis has been done is that those kids are relatively less prepared for ninth grade than our graduates. And so anyway, you see a bit of a break there from eighth grade to ninth grade as opposed to an upward slope. So
you have the data broken down by continuing students versus new kids?
I'll have it next month. So we now have that data in place, and now the analysis needs to happen. So I think it's a really rich analysis, and I hope to have it even well before our renewal visit, as I think it's a compelling case if that's the story that we can tell. And then I think it's valuable in just thinking about, okay, this is the reality. We know what we want. We're a school built for kids through 7 years right now, 12 years, hopefully sometime in the future. But right now we're built for that. And so we need to make every effort to ensure that our eighth grade kids are going to the best school they possibly can. And if Unity's at school, they should be going there. And we did have some cases this year, a critical mass of cases in which kids opted to go to schools that from a statistical standpoint, from an academic standpoint, may not have been as strong as our school. So that's not right. So
but would you characterize just broadly the folks who leave as being high performers, low performers, or somewhere in the middle? Is there a trend that you see there?
My sense is that our higher performing kids may have even more options than kids who are struggling more. And so they may opt for school. Like, we've had kids go to LaGuardia and Brooklyn Tech and, some of these sort of test-in schools that are not open enrollment. So they end up there, and that we wish them well and keep in touch. And then there are kids that perhaps have struggled that then may, I think another story is a student that's struggled at our school and maybe made some gains, but still has progress to make. And in choosing a high school, may choose a school that, from an academic standpoint or otherwise, may not be as good as our high school, based on some fairly sort of objective criteria. And so they opt for that. And so that's we don't want that. We just devoted 3 years of kind of heavy investment in love and care to like seeing kids progress. And if continuing with our school, we think they would be well cared for. And so I think that's the other story you see. While we haven't had as many cases of this year, and it could still play out, we typically have a handful to 10 cases of students who graduated from our 8th grade, who within a month or two of embarking on high school, give us a call back and ask if we have a seat available so they can return to our high school, or return to Unity. And so that may play out in some regard here too. Again, we haven't seen that as of yet this year, but it has historically been the case. So I think we're going to talk about action steps in a moment. But as we look at this data, what we want to see, ideally, are more kids coming in closer to grade level as of 6th grade, more kids accelerating over time from 6th to 8th, and then that trend continuing as more of our kids from 8th to 9th continue at the school and progress, accelerate, grow in a positive direction from there. That's exactly what we want to see. So in the year 2022, given where we are, we're not seeing that based on these data. The same general story unfolds. It's all coming from the same 20-minute, 25-minute test kids take, but in looking at instructional reading levels, you'll see the same kind of trend where kids are coming in roughly 2 years behind reading level. And mind you, when people learn to read, they do so in elementary school. And if you miss out on that opportunity, that chance, it's harder to then progress in that fundamental skill while also then having to apply it to what is relatively rigorous text. And so, hence the case I'm trying to make really hard for why I think a downward expansion would benefit us both for kids coming in at higher levels, but also being able to embark on school in a way that was kind of built for kids having those skills when they come into 6th grade. So more to say here as we think about kind of action steps, but obviously it is not good for kids to be reading at a 5th grade reading level as of 8th grade. Are there questions or reflections here that folks would want to pose out, bring the full team?
Is this, and sorry if I missed this information, is this comparable to what the levels were in prior years, or is that not something we've done in prior years, or how?
That's a great question, Maureen. I don't have this data going back to 2019. I do have it from last year, and so I can introduce that to this chart too, but I don't have it here. But we do have that data for last year, so it would be interesting to say, hey, where are we in the fall of 2021 versus fall of 2022?
Yeah, thank you.
Particularly with respect to that 6th grade cohort. I think that would be interesting to see.
Yep. So I'm going to move us forward. And I think what I want to do is talk a bit about action steps and maybe some just general trends. So this is a compilation of some of the findings, where I think the strength was what I introduced to you back at the beginning of this meeting, which is that our forecasted proficiency in ELA and math as of the fall for middle school students is relatively higher than it was in the fall of last year. So we're starting at perhaps a better place if this data is accurately projecting out. challenges, and there are more of them, and looking at some of that reading data and grade level equivalency data. I think first at the 6th grade level, we've got kids arriving more than a year below some of these foundational skills. So they're coming in at a deficit, which then is harder to kind of like move forward from while also learning new stuff. 9th grade, we're also seeing a divot and kids being below level, grade level wise, and in their instructional reading level, and having to again, start at a deficit. And we talked about some of the enrollment patterns there that are less ideal for us as a school by design. And then I think the third point of challenge or concern here is that in 8th grade, I mean, we pride ourselves on being a school that over 3 years, kids should be closer to high school readiness and at high school readiness by the time they graduate from our school. This data right here is showing that that's not the case, that we've got work to do. So we'll talk a bit more about what that work looks like, but those are some of the big findings that I'm seeing here. Are there other findings folks would want to sort of convey or put forward beyond the 3 challenges that I've named here and the strength I've named here? So let's think about next steps. Like, this is perhaps the most important slide that we'll look at tonight as a team. And so just some actions that we're planning to put forward in the short term as we think about primarily those literacy results. In our minds, like perhaps the most important academic skill we can provide to kids is being really powerful readers and writers. And so looking at those reading scores, that is definitely the place of emphasis and the priority. And so some of this work has been done or continually done, some that needs to continue. And so for in the short term, there are a couple of things that we're looking to do and are doing, and that is around devoting time and resources to curriculum alignment in reading and writing skills across the content areas, science, history, math, etc., and making sure that like our curriculum is well suited for the range of skills kids are demonstrating as they come into our school. In addition to that, thinking about data. And so I think what we're doing tonight is perhaps more of a deep dive than we've done in the past as a board with regard to looking at nitty gritty reading levels and proficiency results using STAR. That is partly a reflection of the work we're doing at the school level as the leadership team, as content teams, et cetera. And so being more mindful of where our kids are now is helpful, and then positioning us to then meet them where they are, to have them develop skills at a pace that sets them up in middle school for high school and for college at the high school level. And then a part of that is in the interventional work that we do, where we do have reading interventions in some form at the middle school. I think expanding them out is perhaps on the table as something we do. We can do that in the short term and over the long term. So a few things we want to do there. I didn't present out to you where our students with disabilities landed in comparison to our general or total population here, but I think that's an analysis to be done to see if there are big differences among those groups. And so that's something to do for the coming month, both for this board, but I think most importantly for our work with our learning specialists. That's the short term. In the long term, I put out 3 things that I think my team has talked about over the past 2 weeks when we've met and thought and scrutinized this data. And so first is just the expansion of intervention programming at the school. And so that comes with just people in-house doing that work for our kids that need it most. We didn't look at ranges, we looked at average values today and tonight. I think we'd also see, and we've seen this in past meetings, I remember Jake actually mentioning this during a meeting a few months ago, that there tends to be a big range across our classes. And so there may be kids coming in at a 3rd grade reading level, and then kids coming in at an 8th or 9th grade reading level in 6th grade. And so catering to each and every one of those kids in the best way possible requires some differentiation, and intervention provides that. So that's one when thinking about sort of big steps moving forward. It also involves increasing the percentage of our eighth graders enrolling in ninth grade. And so I think, as Marianne said, like doing that analysis and looking at the differences across those that graduate from our school that don't. And if there seems to be sort of a big difference between the two groups, I think in any case, we want to increase the number of eighth graders moving on to our high school, but it would be meaningful in setting kids up at our school who attend our school from a grade level and reading level perspective as they experience high school. And then finally, I think, we'll talk a bit more about this during the executive session, but like the expansion downward, it would just mean that our kids might not be coming in at a fourth grade reading level, but maybe at a fifth or sixth grade reading level where the gap is less stark. And so that then allows for kids to experience learning new things in middle school with sort of skills that allow for them to immerse themselves, as opposed to both remediating and learning new things at the same time, which is challenging.
What's your best guess, Josh, if you got an expansion? So I mean, it take a number of years to get it to steady state, but as to, and maybe you don't have that data, but as to sort of the same question I'm asking about eighth grade going into 9, like, right? I mean, how do you think about the fact that you're going to have a bunch of fifth graders and they may or may not stay on for sixth grade, right? Because this your premise assumes that everybody comes in kindergarten, progresses along the way to fifth grade, and then by fifth grade is ready for sixth. But so how do we think about that?
I think that's a smart question. Maybe Josh, I'd love your take, but I'll take a stab at it first. So just based on kind of experiences and thinking about even some of our faculty at the school, I think there are a lot of families that shop around for that continuity between elementary and middle school, because like middle schools are hard. Like finding the right middle school it's a challenge if you don't know the school.
Now in the New York City public school system, right?
Yeah. So I mean, even tonight, my wife and Otto are upstairs at PS11's middle school info session, and like it's daunting. So if you can avoid all that, I think families do. If Melissa were on tonight, she would say, yeah, I'm at a school right now that will go K-12 and pretty happy there. And so for her 2 kids, that's the plan. And so no movement whatsoever, no pressures, none of the stresses, none of the kindergarten interviews that Jim's taken part in, et cetera. Josh, would you add anything there, or what would you say?
I think you're spot on. I would add that obviously it depends on how well the Unity Prep does with its elementary school and what it's doing with its middle school at that time. That kind of states the obvious. I think that the goal that Josh has for 8th grade to 9th grade is a similar goal that I would have from elementary to middle, so somewhere around 75%. I would also say though that if you have an elementary school and you have students who are performing, at or above grade level, and then once new students may come in middle school, you should be obviously supporting the students who may come in at a lower level. At the same time, you want to have a very high bar, and you don't want to lower that bar. And generally speaking, students who are performing, at a lower grade level will rise up to that occasion moving forward. And so I think that, I would just emphasize the second 2 bullets under the long term. I think expanding downward is really probably the most impactful high leverage way to increase the graph that Josh was showing earlier, where students are coming in, very far, below grade level. And then just this second bullet under the long term, the increasing the percentage of 8th graders enrolling in our 9th grade. Josh and I talked about that the last couple of meetings we've had. It's just absolutely essential to get that higher. Like, you're investing so much time and energy into students and families 6th through 8th grade that if you lose them in 9th grade, it's really, really challenging for your high school graduation, high school matriculation to college, graduation to college, all graduation from college. All of those things become a lot more challenging. So that's just something I think the school and Josh should be focused on moving forward.
Thank
So
you.
that sounds nice. That sounds nice. That's actually very helpful. But given the data that we've been discussing tonight, what's your attrition rate? What's the percentage that you're baking into your models to assume that there's going to be attrition?
Yeah, across grades, we shoot for under 10%, right? And so that like, so if a student moves out of the city, we don't kind of include that. But in I can't think of a year in which we haven't hit that number on average across the board. Then when looking at grade levels, and that 8th to 9th grade transition is the big one. We varied from 90% to this year under 40%. So,
So even with the information that you shared tonight about the competition, you still think 10% is a reasonable number?
ideally, what I'd like to get to is for attrition overall, staying like, so if fewer than 10% of our kids leave the school each and every year, I feel like that's solid, knowing kind of like just what the natural trends are. But when looking at specific grades, I would want for that retention rate between 8th and 9th grade to be 80 to 90%. Maybe I'd take 80% right now.
So that's helpful. For the next meeting or at another time, I'd like to drill deeper into that because I'd like to know what the plan is to achieving that. And at 8:41 on a Tuesday night, it's not the right time to do that.
Appreciate it,
I'd
Manny.
definitely like to understand more about that.
Yep. I'll give you a quick 10-second answer. Like one thing that we haven't done that I think is a gap structurally is we don't have an academic counselor at our middle school. We've kind of placed them all at the high school. And so that level of kind of like communication, that transition from like a counselor with those skills, letting kids know like, hey, here's what's important at the high school level. And what our school offers, and then here's what other schools offer. We have some of that happening with our recruitment manager, but he's got kind of a foot in a couple of different seats here, or a bottom in a few different seats here. And so I think that to me would help to bridge this gap between 80% where we are now pretty significantly.
Yeah, that's really helpful. That's more in line where I could drill down a little deeper at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One last thing to think about, Josh, on this kind of same topic, but more in the elementary. Do we have decent data about what sort of a catchment area can be for an elementary school? Like how far are people willing to travel? If we want a good bang for our buck and people staying, how far can it be from the middle school to have a population that's likely to attend both and all of that? And how do we think about it, given that we probably have very little input in where we're going to end up if we do have an elementary school?
Yeah, so I think that's strategic. I think we can give you that data for the middle school, but families have different sort of priorities in elementary school, right?
Something to think about. As Lenny said, it's probably not the time to resolve this, but I'd be curious to talk about that a little more as we go into the visit.
Yep. Noted. Cool.
Yeah, I would just add, I think both Marion and Lenny, you're really on to exactly what I would argue the board should be pushing on for a real deep dive into whether you want to call it a analysis, but also like what's the marketing strategy for both the elementary school, the new elementary school, eventually for the campaign for like elementary to middle. And then Josh and I have talked a little bit about this, but really like what's the current and future strategy for 8th to 9th grade matriculation at the school? Like to me as a non-board member, I love exactly what you're talking about. I think that's a great board push and topic for a future board meeting.
Yeah, this last comment and I'm done. So what I'm trying to get to, and I think would be helpful, is I'd like to know the strategic plan, the communication, whatever branding and marketing we need to put out there, and what resources are we lacking to help us achieve that, whether it's a guidance counselor, academic counselor, whoever, because in most cases, I would presume that it's not the child making the decision, it's the parent or collaboration of it. So if we're not communicating effectively to all those parties, then we're widening the gap.
So this is Earl. So today I went to a visit for my daughter at Limon, and Lenny's spot on. Like my wife expressed interest. She's 5th grade, did very well. We're looking at where she's going to go to 6th grade. And the moment she pressed send from a communication perspective, expressing interest for a visit, we've been communicated with probably 19 times. Today on the visit, we met with kids who started in 5th grade, kids who transitioned into 6th grade middle school. High school students have been there all the way from kindergarten. They were very honest, very open. One of them gave my daughter her cell phone number. She was like, listen, if you want to just ask me some questions, and I'm ear hustling, that you don't want no one to hear about, just call me. And she called her sometime tonight because she wants to go back for another visit. I think Lenny's thought is spot on, especially when you think about what your vision has always been, Josh. And we've talked about this way before all of this was about that. The goal is to engage at K and see them all the way through 12. But there has to be an intentional plan to do that. And for a parent like me, if you don't speak to that, it's cool, but I'm not sending my child there.
Good stuff. Good. So we've got at least 2 topics for future meetings that I think are really important. So thank you for that. Jim, where do you want to go from here? I think there's no associate board members tonight, so we can probably jump into approval items. If that makes sense right away.
Yeah, and I suggest that. I suggest the second bullet we move to executive.
Yeah.
So minutes and the org chart. So okay, so let's start with the minutes. Does anybody have any questions about the minutes from the last meeting? Okay,
This
we all
is
turn
the
our
part.
video.
Yeah, your video on, folks, just so we count toward quorum according to rules.
See some cameras turned on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and Lenny and Madonna, are you able to go camera on tonight too?
I'm in the hospital. If I go on camera, it's gonna go shaky. We've been having problems in the hospital today. So we're actually on Cisco backup.
That's fine. We just need to see a raised hand and then you can go back. That's okay. I like it. Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And then the second item of approval tonight is really, so this is just a request by our liaison as we refine and polish off our renewal application. And so within that application, we put forward a revised organizational chart. In that chart, we did propose with our downward expansion, essentially the same leadership model that we have at our sites at the middle school and high school, where there's a co-leadership or co-principal model. So this org chart in its revised form with that expansion simply includes a co-principal model at the elementary school that is very, very similar to what we're doing at the middle school and high school. And so Paula just wanted that to be reflected in the board minutes as a part of that submission. So that's what is on the docket for approval tonight.
Okay, great. Any questions? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Let's see, we're running overtime here. Okay, Josh, anything else you want to address before we go to executive session?
No, I think we can go into executive session tonight.
Okay, let's turn the recording on.
Right. So I'm gonna just stop the recording.